Hey, welcome back to our Fire Engineering Humpday Hangout, issues and challenges in today's fire service. I'm Rick Lasky, along with the rest of our maniacs, John Salka, Scott Thompson, Curtis Burt, and as always, we've got another great show lined up for you. Always some little things like show you where the exits are and all that stuff. I got to tell you, remember, as a reminder, if you have any questions, zip over to X, formerly Twitter, and send it our way. Make sure you had a hashtag FETalk, and our producer, Mark, we'll throw that our way. But guys, everybody's doing good. I got to do my ritual thing for the boss, Chief Rhodes and Diane. FDIC's right around the corner, folks. It's going to be here before you know it in April. Registration is open for hot. If you don't sign up now, you're going to miss out, man. And then, get your hotels, get everything ready to go. It's going to be another great year. Real quick on our end, John and I are doing our 4-hour workshop on leadership on Monday. Again, they fill up. I always feel bad, guys. And Scott, you've had it where they come and close the doors because we're overloaded. And then people are like, they're upset. So make sure you sign up for the workshops. And then John and I are doing well, it's a new one, but it's a new one at FDIC. We've been doing it for a little bit, called the Firefighters Fire Chief. What it takes to be a firefighter's fire chief. Scott, you're back, right?
Yep, I'm back. I don't know what day I'm doing. I'm doing just my hour and 45-minute functional fire company, but that's what I'm doing.
Based on the best-selling book.
Yeah.
Fire company.
You should get into advertising.
You know what's different, Kurt, is John and Bobby used to would always hold that book up.
And still nobody's bought one yet. I think I've sold 2 now.
Another shameless.
Only the ones you've given away.
Yeah. Shameless promotion for our best buddy. But
I love it. Thank you.
Well, good. So, Kurt, what's going on? What's new in Pearland, man? You got a great boss down here. We talk about Jay Taylor, Chief, but what's happening down there, man?
We're just moving and shaking. Got through budget, so we're getting everything new. We're getting ready to start designing Station 7. So that'll hopefully be built in the next year or two. Besides that, we're just moving and shaking.
And John, and Scott, you know this, Pearland, John, you and I have been there a bunch of times to teach for him. Scott, you obviously know where it's at. If you Google Pearland Fire Department, the acronym or the other name for it is the Money Fire Department. Because
we wish.
The biggest challenge is to figure out how they're going to spend all their damn money down there.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, what I love, and I'm just going to, and you guys can, be all modest and everything. I brag about John's volunteer department he's with. So, South Blooming Grove Fire District, which are great firefighters, obviously the FDNY, but Pearland and then Scott, where you're at the county, for our viewers, our listeners, if you're listening to this while you're driving, if you want to see how to get it done, if you want to see how to fight fires aggressively in a very safe way, but in an aggressive manner, if you want to be a real firefighter, if you want to cut, I'm just telling you, you guys, how about it, John? We talk about it. Pearland and the county, they're not just costumes they're wearing, turnout gear. Like some of these guys are imitation, Chicago FDY guys, big mustaches and a hat and all that shit. And they're nothing. I don't know, Scott, how you guys do it, man, but you pull it off, buddy.
Thank you. You're too kind.
The county and Pearland are just 2 great places. But so reminder about FDIC. And then before we get going here, today is, we always try to mention this, he would be mad if we called him a legend. He was my surrogate godfather. Chief Alan Brunacini's passing. Today's the anniversary, back from 2017. Every year it's great. And there's so between Bobby and now Billy Guston and Tom Brennan. There's so many of we got to find the all-stars, and that's what we're doing. All of us are trying to do it.
Right? That ad that host company put out for Guston was very classy,
Very classy.
Very classy. So that's our goal, guys. There's a lot of people on this panel that have some time on the job, but our whole effort is always to find those next all-stars, to find the future, who's coming up next. We all started somewhere. All of us were brand new, someone gave us a chance. So hopefully you're submitting articles, and don't get frustrated if you don't get your article published right away. It takes a while. Keep in mind, they're about 3 months ahead. They're putting to bed right now 1 issue. They're halfway through another one. They're starting a 3rd one. That's the publishing industry. And then each month has a different theme. So if you want to do on safety and they say, well, if that's in June, you got to wait till June. Same thing at FDIC.
And you know what?
Go ahead.
And there's another thing to be said about that. Rick and I had this conversation last week or 2 weeks ago. You know, and I used to go on with all the shows, but right now with FDIC, I don't know if it was a couple of weeks back when everybody started getting their calls or getting their letters saying, oh, you've been accepted or you haven't been accepted, right? And of course, the guys that have been accepted are very proud. Most of them put it in there and, put a post in on Facebook somewhere. Oh, thanks again. My 13th year, my 29th year, my 150th year, or whatever it is, And some guys like, I finally got in after, 5 tries. I'm in, and some guys, of course, put it up there. And I'm not sure why guys put it up there and say, I didn't make it in. I'm not quite sure why guys do that. But some guys put it up, oh, after 5 years or after 6 years, straight, I didn't get accepted, blah, blah, blah. And then you see a couple of guys chime in. Now, that's on Facebook, right, where guys can chime in and you don't know who they are or what they really, And guys are chiming in with negative comments. Yeah, well, they pick the same old guys every year. And, if they don't like what you're saying, you don't get in. And it's all nonsense stuff. But I was so happy this year. David actually posted right in a couple of those Facebook entries and said, no, that's not how it works. We just got done doing it. It's a long process. And he came up with stats about how many people first year, how many people second year, and how many people, it's quite a fair process. It's not some slanted thing where, no, obviously there are some pretty well, I don't want to say connected because that's not what it is. They're pretty well respected people that have been doing it for a long time, that have great programs and are there pretty regularly. And that's, just turn on, ABC News and they get the same people behind the desk every night giving the news because that's where they work and they do a good job. And of course, there's a certain amount of new people that come in every year. I'm sure they monitor that, how many people are first timers and stuff like that. So like Rick always says, you know what, if you didn't get in, if they turned you down, which sounds like a terrible way to really put it, but just keep trying. And eventually, if what you're doing is worthwhile. Now, if what you're doing is not worthwhile, wink, wink, maybe you'll never get in and maybe you got to worry about something else, But most of the time, if you have a decent program and a decent presentation and all the pieces fit together, you're not some Proby fireman teaching how to be the chief of department or something. other than that, you got to stick with it. You got to stick with it. That'll get you.
Exactly. And you guys know, I've been with Fire Engineering Magazine since 1995. I've been on the FDIC advisory board since they bought it in 96. So I've gotten to see it all these years evolve. And real quick, John, I want to just play off of something we talked before. If you don't get selected, the worst thing you do is get on there and bitch and complain about it, because I had a guy do that. He was so upset, and I called him. I said, take your stuff down. You didn't get it this year, but you're getting it next year. There's only so many classrooms. And when you have like 1.5 times the more classes you have available space, somebody's not going to go. And I had one guy come up to me, Scott and Kurt, John, you hear me say this. He goes, I put in for store fires, and they turned me down the second year in a row. I go, yeah, that's because John Norman does store fire. Yeah, I go, but John Norman does store fires, but John, so, pick something, and what I'm saying? And now here's one of the things with the advisory board we're doing, and I could talk about now. So it's public. We did away with the day. For years, we've done 2 days of opening ceremonies, which I kind of was always one that said, why are we doing that? We're posting the flags twice. You do opening ceremonies, you take them out at the end, but you don't. We're doing this, and that started years ago when there was somebody that really wanted to do a lot of productions way back when. And what we came up with as a team,
I miss Benjamin Franklin.
I can show you that picture with me and Benjamin, but anyway, David, the boss, Chief Rhodes, finally, and Diane finally pulled the trigger on it. Where we did away with the Thursday opening ceremonies, which what that did was when you take that room and you split up, that gave us like 39 more classrooms to do Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You open that up and you do an hour and 45-minute breakouts, and you end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, probably 9 or 10 or 20. So and then there's the hotel across the street we're connected to. They've got classrooms now. Now there's a little bit of remodeling going on this year. You're going to see that hallway where the authors always sit as being, because they're expanding the convention center and they're building some hotels. So folks, just hang in there. We're trying to do what we can to add more classroom space, to get more people in there. Like John said, just be patient. Find something, find your niche, but I'm telling you, I use John Norman all the time. You're not going to knock John Norman. Hey, Chief Norman, we're going to give you a break this year on doing store fires because Enzo wants to do it from the Beeperville Fire Department. I'm just, there's certain things that would be like, and I'll just say selfishly, well, I want to do pride and ownership. Well, no, that's actually my program. Find something else to do, but don't, John made a good point. Stay with it. Don't post negative stuff because there's always a plan behind the plan. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to get in there, man. Not everybody that applies for these other conferences gets accepted either. So, if you want to hate, you're going to end up never being there. I'm just going to say that. So be patient. I'm just asking you, please be patient. So anyway, John, we hit you up the other day about the Salka clan. You got everything going on with your family there. Curtis, your boys, your 2 boys, and Jake over in Galveston, and then Scott Thompson's whole mafia family is running the
Arlington
Mafia
Mafia.
departments. They have a stranglehold. Have you ever noticed about the Thompsons? They got like, it's funny. Every time I follow this like Goodfellas thing on Facebook. They put a lot of people I used to work for. A lot of people that I used to work for. I used to bodyguard back in Chicago, and I'm like, and whenever I see that family hierarchy, Tony the Big Tuna Cardo, they used to tell me, Ricky, how's your boss? How's your boss, Michael? Joey the Clown Lombardi wrote on the back one of my buddy Kirby's work release programs for softball from the Craig, Ricky, thanks for the support, kid, and all this stuff. And then I see another one, and it's Scott Thompson at the top. And then you start seeing all these fingers of all these mafia firefighters. And as somebody just said, Scott, did you see the comment? Mark,
I saw that.
Again.
I saw that. Yeah, I need to get a hat. Hilarious.
Oh, good.
Love it, Jeff. Love it, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, guys, look, we never work with a script, but we come up with ideas. I'm not going to say sometimes we just go, what do you want to talk about? I don't know what you're talking about. But we talked about something after a show a while back, and I just wrote it down as like a future topic. And that was the word sacrifice. We talk a lot about memorials. We talk a lot about tributes. We just talked about Tom Brennan, Alan Brunacini, Bill Gustin, people, that are no longer with us. And so many people in our business sacrifice so much from their families to the job, to the people they serve, and so on and so forth. And I'm not saying, oh, look, Pat, look at us, but there is some stuff we probably need to talk about. And that's, the whole duty, pride, honor thing. I've said this before. It's not just a weekend, but a career's worth of sacrifice. The commitment to the job, to the training, to the effort, to the passion, the good and bad calls, the losses. We're still losing family because of 9/11. Every day there's someone that is lost. But I just want to start off with this about the word sacrifice. I want to read you something. My favorite book in the whole wide world is The 5 People You Meet in Heaven.
Yeah.
Written by Mitch Albom. He's a sports reporter up in Detroit. He's got like 15 bestsellers. The movie has John Voight, Ellen Bernstein, Jeff Daniels, Michael Imperioli. It changed my life. I'm just telling you, I'm not trying to be corny. It changed my life as a person, as a husband, as a father, as a firefighter. And it still does. And I tell people all the time, get the book first, read it, then watch the movie. But if you know the story, the 5 People in Heaven, and I'm just reading you the back matter. It says this is a story about a man named Eddie, and he ends up getting killed. But he's one of these guys that felt like he never accomplished anything in his life. He just, I was a loser. No, he's a World War II vet and all this. He got injured in he got injured in World War II, and it changed his life. He got shot in the leg, but he has to meet 5 people after he gets killed before he's allowed to go to heaven. And the first one he meets is the Blue Man. It's this carnival worker where his dad worked on the shore. And he didn't even know. He was playing baseball in the street, and he ran out in front of this car, and this guy was driving. First time he drove, he had a heart attack. Well, that's what happened. He has to forgive. I won't say, I don't want to ruin the movie for you. He has to forgive somebody close to him in his life and the lesson is hatred. Hate is a curved blade. The harm you do to yourself, not to others, and so on and so forth. You need to forgive. And there's all these things he has to forgive himself, but there's one on sacrifice. And if you watch this, there's a part where Eddie's army captain, played by Michael Imperioli, Christopher from The Sopranos. He's his Imperioli is his captain from World War II when we were, this one particularly with the Japanese. And about sacrifice, after he describes how he was killed protecting and taking care of his soldiers, his captain ends up stepping on a landmine. But the whole point is, he goes, why are you here, Captain? He goes, sacrifice. And he goes, yeah, but you're gone. He goes, yeah, but people don't understand sacrifice. He says, sacrifice isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. He said this, people, he talks like he's from New York. People stop sacrificing for one another. They lose what makes them human. It's the noblest thing we can do is sacrifice. And, we've talked about the one thing Bobby used to say that we do for the public is give their dignity back. But, when you look at the wear and tear on a firefighter's body, the wear and tear on their families. John, you set it up on the big stage in front of 3,000 people. And someone said, what would you do differently if you start over? You said, I'd spend more time with my family. All four of us are family people. We love our kids and, so with grandkids and so on and so forth, sacrifice to the job, sacrifice the ultimate set. There's all these different things. And I thought, I looked, I go, we talked about this briefly once before, and maybe we just spend the show talking about, what I just led in with, that it's not a bad thing. It's one of the most noblest things we can do is sacrifice. Fathers and mothers do it. John, you talk about it, and I want to ask, you to tell a couple of stories about this. Marty Monahan, about sacrificing for your people, whether it's like you would for your kids. Parents give up food so their kids can eat. Parents give up so much for their children. So do leaders. So I've had bosses in the fire service that gave up so much for little old Ricky boy. And I'm going to throw this to you, John. You tell that story about Marty, about leadership and how leaders sacrifice for their people. Kind of take that and run with it, if you will.
Well, I mean, it's a great short story. It's about my buddy Marty, who was always a great boss anyway. And he wasn't one of them, I'll just call him a great old-fashioned boss, And, one night when I was at a job with his guys, and it was middle of the winter up in the Bronx. He was a boss in the engine, and I think it went to a third or a fourth alarm or something. His guys finally said, hey, Lou, what are we still doing here? He said, I don't know why the chief hasn't let us go. Our bosses usually, the big chiefs usually let the first alarm go when it gets into a second and a third and a fourth alarm, especially in bad weather. He said, let me go check with the chief. And he goes up to the chief. Chief says, what are you doing here? He said, that's what I was just going to ask you. He said, I let the whole first alarm go an hour ago. I guess you didn't hear it on the radio or whatever. Oh, gee, I'm sorry, Chief. He said, no. Take you guys and get back to the firehouse and warm up and let them eat and, take care of the boys. He said, do me a favor. Just go in service when you get back right away. I got a lot of relocators here that don't know where they're going or what's going on. At least I'll have one of the regular engines. He said, okay, Chief. So they head back to the firehouse, and when they're back in, and he tells his chauffeur, tell the boys we're in service right now. As soon as we back in, Chief want us right away in service. We still got to shower and eat and change and get the rig back in service. Okay. So over the course of the next half hour, every 10 or 15 minutes, the chauffeur comes up and says, hey, Lou, the rig's ready to go. It's all fueled up, all watered up. We got all fresh bottles on it. We're all ready to go. He said, okay, tell the guys they can shower now and clean up and turn the stove on, and we can maybe start thinking about dinner. And 15 minutes later, he comes up, okay, the guys are all good, and the laundry's on, and supper's on the stove. It'll be ready in about 15 minutes. Great. And then Marty goes and takes a shower, a cold shower, because he knew he was in an old firehouse that wouldn't support 5 or 6 hot showers in a row. And he knew his guys had to get hot showers because they were his men, and he took care of them. And that was a sacrifice. He's probably 10 or 15 years older than all those guys, and not that really mattered, but he did it knowingly. Said, how about a shower and get everything done, get the laundry done. He didn't say, spread the showers out so I can get some hot water, which wouldn't be a mortal sin to do, but he wasn't that kind of guy. So that's just a small example, and it's really just about a hot shower. But it really makes the point, I think, very well about sacrifice, about, doing without maybe so somebody else can benefit by your action,
Well, and I love that story, John, because of that. It's a very simple story about who matters most in the firehouse. And we talk about this in our class. We did a company officer academy, Scott and Kurt, down in Alpharetta, Georgia. And I remember we're shaking hands with everybody. We do our little graduation. A guy come up, he held out my hand. He goes, Chief, it was 58. I go, what? He goes, you and Chief Salk over 3 days said it 58 different times. It's always about your people. It's always about your people. And I'm like, well, leadership and parenting is the same thing. You see a bunch of jackasses out there, the children, you just look at the parents. You see a bunch of firefighters out there, jackasses, you look at the company officers, so on and so forth. But it is truly about taking care of your people and the sacrifices. And Scott and Kurt, you guys remember, Calvin Allison, one of my favorite captains and union presidents, and his 3 boys that are firefighters. And I hired Andy. Scott, you were there. And then after I retired to do this with John, Andy was electrocuted and I'll just say this: there was a lapse in communication. Calvin was on this show, remember, John, and he was very upset and sobbing a little bit about what his son went through, and made the comment that, Chief, if you were there, this wouldn't have happened, because we all have a system. The outside vent person needs to give you a report. Needs to be able to tell you, hey, whatever, to the 18th battalion, the 1/8, mission accomplished. He knows the OV's done with their job, and so on and so forth. And then he got electrocuted, and he had made his 5 years yet. So, we've done fundraisers for him and so on and so forth. But it's a guy that his entire life was impacted by what he did at one simple fire. So I guess, Scott, I want to throw it to you too, and then Kurt, but we when we lean on people as chief officers about not having your goggles on, you only have two eyes. It only takes, we only have, if this isn't about making pizzas. We talk about time. We don't get do-overs. We don't go back and do, we have one chance to get it right. And when we don't, it ends in horrible, devastating, results. But Scott, go ahead and talk. If you got two boys in the fire service, you know what I'm talking about.
No, and if you really break down what this job is all about, it's about sacrifice, right? When we take the oath, we're sacrificing certain things right off the bat, our health, our welfare, a lot of times time away from our family. But the one thing I want to say about it is, servant leadership is becoming a hot topic, a word used in the fire service. And I'm kind of mixed about that use in public safety for some other reasons. But everybody loves to use that term until it's time to sacrifice, right? Everybody wants to be a servant leader until it's time to sacrifice for your men. Take the cold shower or sign up for an extra tour or do whatever it is. But I can tell you this with 100% certainty, and I think all of you will agree because you got time on the job. Just about every sacrifice that I have made has repaid me tenfold, has had a great return on that investment. And the higher you go, I always say this, the higher you go by choice, you put the speaking trumpets on your collar, the more you better be willing to invest and the more you better be willing to sacrifice to take care of your people. And I think we're getting away from that. I'm hearing more conversations start with me instead of we. And that concerns me. But I can tell you this, you want to have that work-family balance. That's important. But this job will give you back tenfold whatever you put into it. And I really believe that.
And you're exactly right. And it's not Curtis, it's not and John always talk about this. Look, we all do. You stepped up to be a firefighter. So on the one hand, don't give woe is me and, so look at me, how some of these guys are out there purposely looking for the rubs on the shoulders and like that. It's like,
I haven't met Rick. I haven't met that guy yet that's given up his trust fund because Dad said, if you don't become a firefighter, you're removed from the trust fund, right? We all sign up to do this. We all voluntarily raise our right hand and take that oath.
Exactly. So guys, if to our viewers, we're not sitting there going, oh, poor us, poor fire. We know what we signed up for, but as leaders and as future leaders, I think it's an important thing. This whole sacrifice thing needs to be recognized. If you're truly going to say you're there for the men and women that work for you, if you're truly there for your family, if you're truly there for the greater cause, and you have to realize that there's stuff we do. It's not just going out in the snow or when it's freezing or raining, whether, losing sleep or sleep deprived and all this stuff. We're finally addressing mental health awareness. In the old days, they call you a coward if you need to talk to someone, you had a problem. Now we're actually acknowledging that it's not normal to see what a firefighter sees. There's people that can't, some of us are okay with it. It doesn't get to us right now, but some people can't hold a deceased child in their arms or burnt up bodies and things like that. So we've crossed over this bridge, if you will, to where we're being a little bit more proactive. That it takes a lot out of you. Hang on, Kurt. Go ahead, John.
And another thing, sacrifice really overlaps so many different elements of what we do and so many other features and important things. And I have another short story. It's about a guy from the FDNY. I went to a funeral. It was a line of duty. It was a post 9/11 funeral, but it was a line of duty funeral. And I see a guy who I know who's a staff chief. It was from my era. He had like my time on the job, but he was a staff chief. But he wasn't dressed in his uniform. He was in, he was in an overcoat and a tie and a jacket. I went up to him, what's up? What'd you do? What are you in the union or something now? He said, no, you didn't hear? I said, what? Turns out this guy was a staff chief. Good guy. Bronx fireman, officer. And he made it up to staff. meaning the chief of department staff. It was like an assistant chief, probably a full assistant chief. And it was a new chief of department who was, I'll just call him abusive. He was a bit of a knucklehead, yelling at the staff chiefs. Like the staff chiefs, I think the staff chiefs met like every Tuesday, like at 9 a.m. at headquarters every week for a talk about what was going on and what was coming up and how last week went. And he was always berating them and yelling. And you're talking about like 15 or 20 gray-haired 50 or maybe even 60-year-old men who have 30 or 35 years on a job, who've given their whole life to the job, sitting around this table. And he was, he'd yell and scream and, not continuous, but just a very terrible attitude. And and this guy said, Chief, what are you yelling at? We're all here because we're working for you and we're working for the job. We want to do the best we can. Can we tone us down and talk like gentlemen? When I'm on, and he had it out with him once or twice. And the chief of department fired him. One day he was on the way home in his staff car, and the phone rang, and it was a friend of his who was actually the chief of department, the guy who fired him, whatever it was. It was the chief of department who fired him. He was an assistant chief, but he's driving home, and his buddy, who's like the chief of operation, calls him up, says, "Where are you at?" He said, "I'm on the way home. I'm out on the LIE. I'm heading home." He says, "Boss is going to fire you tomorrow morning." He said, "What?" "Yep, he's either going to demote you back to deputy, which you can do in my job. Any staff chief, 2, 3, 4 stripes. You could be a deputy the next morning, right?" So they can't actually fire you out of the job, but they can drop you back down to your civil service rank. He said, "You're kidding me." Make a long story short, he ended up tapping out, going on medical leave. None of that stuff ended up happening, but he ended up retiring. He ended up putting his papers in and retiring at his current rank, which benefited him, for his pension and stuff like that. But what's the whole story? What's he spoke up. He spoke up, and look what he sacrificed. He sacrificed his career to tell this guy, "Stop yelling at us. We're all here. We're all here to do the right thing." Everybody else in that room felt exactly the same way as him. And none of them sacrificed their job to say anything. They all sat there. And I'm not criticizing them, but sacrifice sometimes is as simple as something like that. And the guy, he ended his career. A week later, he was retired.
Well, and there's some people that can't do that, Kurt. There's some people that we always talk about. Everybody wants to be the lion until it's time to do lion shit. And they talk a good game, but they don't. And I just dealt with it with a department the other day in another state. John knows that, there's people that are willing to stand up for what's right. And then there's people that are just weak and weak-willed and weak in integrity and character. And, who they are. And you're like, how did they end up, first of all, in the fire service? Secondly, scrub the tattoo off your arm, and take the ball cap off, because you're not one of us. You're not a true public servant. You're not a brother or sister and all that. But Curtis, you've got your 2 boys and your best friend at home, Phoebe, and that, and one of your sons is on the job now, and that you've seen it firsthand, as we all have, about the sacrifice families make, for, like John said, "I wish I would spend more time with my family." He said that to 3,000 people. Talk about your thoughts about maybe some advice to someone out there about, John, we talked about the work-life balance thing, how to accomplish that and still be into the job.
I think the biggest thing is just, you have to put as much effort into both sides as you do anything, because, we all have sacrificed by teaching and going around and being on the job and taking extra time and doing all that. And it's to make us better in this job and to sacrifice sometimes family, sometimes the job for each other. And you just have to figure out how to do it and make it and totally get into both sides of it. A lot of times you see guys that go home and they're not home. They're still at work, or they come to work and they're still at home. And that's sacrificing a lot. And you have to learn to cut those and to give each its equal share. Coming on this job, I mean, this is it. When you first come on, you all know that we all volunteered and did stuff for free, and we went and taught for free, and we went and stoked for instructors for free until we got on the job. You were talking earlier about getting into FDIC. We used to do a lot of that stuff, and we sacrificed to get onto the job
for free as helpers.
100%. We'd take our own vacation time to go up to volunteer at the academy or to volunteer somewhere. But that was so we could give back to the people and to do this job. And then as you raise up in the ranks and stuff, you have to learn that you have to sacrifice more. You're not just sacrificing for the citizens and the people we're there to serve or for our total mission, but then you get promoted to chauffeur. Well, guess what? You've now got a whole crew of folks that you got to sacrifice for. And then you get a lieutenant. And then as you go up the ranks, you're sacrificing for more and more of those. if you're doing this job correctly and you're being a good boss.
And that's where you got to separate the personal feelings, out of, like we talked about. If you're making decisions based on what's in your heart, you're now subjective, you're not objective. Use your heart as your moral compass, use your head for common sense, and make good decisions. And it kind of gets a little bit, on the cloudy side. I just want to go back to, we talked about FDIC at the beginning of the show. Larry McCormick, one of our good friends, one of the most decorated firefighters at the Chicago Fire Department.
And the most trained.
Our good friend Tommy Trevino is to bring him as a helper. Come as how many people did we have?
His own time and his own dime.
Oh, Scott and Curtis, you were with me since 1996 there. Scott, you came right after, how many, and John, you same thing. We had people that would beg to be helpers. That'll have to hold the ladder.
Take their own time off.
I'll let them go. I'll do this. I'll help clean up. I'll do stuff. And then what we do, we go, it was like, yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Billy Craddock worked for like 5 years at my hands-on training. 5 years he worked with us for not a cent, for not a penny. God rest his soul, died in the line of duty. But and the fire department, the fire service is full of guys like that.
Oh, and it was one of those things where, we had guys come out a year and we all were like, no, you're not coming back. This is not about you. It's about the students, and it was for nothing. You don't get paid anything and all that. They'll put you up and so on and so forth. But people like Larry and everybody else, it's like all of a sudden you turn to them, you go, now it's the next evolution, right? Scott and Kurt and John, we used to do this. Okay, Larry, you got the next one. What? You got the next group. I'll be right here with you.
Years.
You take the lead. And the next thing they're just popping and doing, and now they're a regular. And, so go ahead, John.
And I got one more thing, and we've all done it already. We're all officers. All of us except me, obviously, have been a chief of department or a staff chief, right? And what do you sacrifice to do that? You sacrifice the fun of riding the back step and having a nozzle and forcing doors and making searches because now you're standing out front with a radio. Now you're a battalion chief, or maybe even not a battalion chief anymore. Guys used to tell me, "Oh, why don't you be a deputy?" I said, "I don't want to be a deputy." You end up. Joe DiBernardo and a couple other guys I know were actually selected. They were deputies. They actually got recruited to be staff chiefs downtown and came right back. Well, that ain't for me. I'm done. And I got to work in the field. I got to work in the firehouse. So some guys sacrifice the fun part of the career, the lower end of the career, the work part of the career. Some guys sacrifice that, to go up through the ranks, knowing that, they wanted to do it. We all wanted to be officers. We all wanted to be chiefs, whatever rank we ended up at. But, you're sacrificing something. For everything you get, there's something you're giving away. There's something you're forgetting about.
Well, and, John's been chief of departments, volunteers. Kurt, you've been chief of department. Scott, you and I were together like 10 years working side by side in Louisville. How many times did we look at each other? I know I did with Tim and Terry and Daryl. I went, I got to be the biggest freaking moron idiot in the world to have taken this fire chief's job. Why would I take a job where I can get the shit beat out of me and not have any rights, not be able to defend myself, or everybody thinks, people could just, as assistant chief, I can do whatever I have to. It's still the bosses, but you're sitting there going, well, I'm it, man. Come after me. And they just, there's the haters that just hate, just to hate. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, what did I do to you? And so I think you sacrifice, everything you stand for. Sometimes there's no turning back. Once you're the chief, it's hard to go backwards. And go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
No, you make a great point, Rick. And I challenge people when I do these classes. We all travel it. And how many times have you heard, my chief forgot where he came from, or we don't have a firefighter's chief? So I would also, for those listening, know, if you want that kind of chief, you got to be willing to put yourself in that position, right? Or you're going to get the knuckleheads that come up through other avenues and they're not well accepted in the firehouse and they can't wait to get out of it. But we've been talking about sacrifice, but some of the things we sacrifice, our egos, our emotion, our time, our comfort, those are the obvious. Sometimes we got to sacrifice financially, to kick in and make up the differences. But we also gotta sacrifice those comforts and maybe put ourselves in those positions for the greater cause. One of the reasons I became a fire chief, and I never thought I would become one, I was recruited, but I wanted to influence the American Fire Service. I had this vision of what I thought being a firefighter should be and what the suburban fire service should look like. And one of my mentors said, hey, man, the only way you're ever going to see that is if you put yourself in a position to influence that. And man, did I want to get out of the firehouse? Did I want to leave riding a rig? Heck no. But somebody's going to be in these positions, and you're going to have somebody that's going to do favorable things, or you're going to get a knucklehead.
Oh, and Curtis, you remember Chief Tom Freeman, one of our mentors.
Oh, yeah.
Tom's the one that told me when I was an assistant chief working with you, he's like, hey, he goes, look, he goes, if you're tired of all the mutts in the fire service, why don't you go out and be a good one? He goes, it's time to put up or shut up. How about, he goes, no, he goes, stop your bitching, pal. And I'm like, oh, he goes, no, how about we infuse the positive side of the gene pool? All these people sit there and bitch and complain at the kitchen table, but offer no solutions, whether that's verbally or through their work ethic and taking on responsibility. Sometimes you go, I had a guy that didn't want to promote Scott with us from captain division of training. I'm like, why not? And well, I finally got my company together. I go, no, but now you have a chance to train the whole freaking fire. You have a chance to impact not just these guys, everybody, and I'm not saying don't be selfish, but that's what you do. When you become a parent, you immediately, they ought to just give you teachers a sacrifice, because now it's all about that kid.
Yeah.
It's all about that. Go ahead, John. You got something?
Well, no, I was just remembering, when I was coming up through the job, what you finally figured out when you became an officer or maybe a captain or battalion chief was, the guys that took the staff chief jobs, the guys that went to work in straight days, Monday to Friday, and all the other nonsense. Like Scott said, they didn't put in for that. Guys aren't. There's one or two knuckleheads that are just rubbing their knuckles and they got marbles in their hands and they're waiting to be the chief of the department someday. But most guys just get thrust up there. Most guys get thrust up, and you know what happens? Most guys get invited. Like, you get a guy down there and say, "Hey, Billy, hey, what's up, John? Hey, you want to do me a favor? What? We got a staff chief opening. We need a chief of training. I know you've been a deputy for a while, and I never thought I'd lead the field. I know, but I'm asking you. You think you can come up and do it for me?" A lot of guys go up to staff because a buddy of theirs or a former boss of theirs says, "Come on up. I could use your help. I could use your skills up here." And guys sacrifice. They leave their comfort. Guy's a deputy for 5 years, which is like a nice, comfortable job in the FDNY. You're making nice money. You're working 24s like firemen, right? Going to fires maybe a little bit later than a battalion chief, but you're still going to jobs now and then. And they walk away from it. Why? Because a good friend of theirs said, come on, come up. It's time to get back to the job. And you know what? And that's what guys say. It's time to get back to the job. Sometimes you got to take these staff chief jobs, in a big job or even in a small job that only has maybe a chief and two staff chiefs, right? Somebody's got to do it. And if you didn't want to do it, you can always rationalize by saying, I'm going to get back to the job that's treated me so good for the past 20 years, that made me love the job. I'm going to get back a little bit now.
Exactly. And Kurt, we've talked about this forever, but what do you say? You're talking to the academy class and you're talking about values and what's expected of Pro B firefighter and all that, so on and so forth. I know you talk about this whole commitment thing when it comes to sacrifice. That, number one, I always tell people, you gave up your right, your freedom of speech right is pretty much gone when you become a firefighter. You can't just go out and say whatever you want, post whatever you want, do whatever, because if you want to do that, go work at a fast food restaurant, but you can't do it as a firefighter. Your freedom of speech in the First Amendment is there to protect you from the consequences of your, it's there to protect you from the government, not from the, I'm sorry, let me say, it's there to protect you from the government, not from the consequence of your speech. You're on your own for what you say. But how do you address that so we can build on this in the future to get people realizing that they're serving a greater cause? I'm not trying to sound like, oh my goodness, look, but we are. There's grandmas and grandpas and little kids and people that are having the worst days of their life that need us, and they have expectations for us. And I don't think you get there to meet those expectations without sacrifice. So go ahead and your thought on that.
No, and I think one of the biggest things we talk about is sacrificing. Is we're in the fire service. It's the greatest job in the world, but the fire service doesn't owe us anything. We owe it everything. So everything that we are, everything that we do. So we have to sacrifice to give as much as we can to this job and to the business and to the people that put us here. You can't, if that means that you can't say what you want, then you know what? Oh, well, I got the greatest job in the world. Why would I can shut up for a little bit, or I can, not have a new car every 2 years, or I can, do whatever. But, we have the greatest job and we have to give everything to it. And that, I think, is sacrifice in itself. But I think it's because it deserves it.
Well, and John, we all did, this group, we did a show a while back on the word commitment. what it means to be committed to something, which ties right to that word sacrifice. We've talked about before, like I believe pride, honor, integrity are all tied together. We talked about how a lot of our values, duty, pride, honor, all these different things are kind of, I think they're attached to each other. But I think the word commitment, isn't it? Commitment, your way of life, your job, what you're thinking, volunteer career, isn't that tied to that word sacrifice just as much, that word commitment? And
Absolutely. Who you asking?
I was asking you. I know you're flicking a little bit there.
Absolutely. But all of these qualities are all intermingled and tangled up with each other. It's not like each one is a standalone, sacrifice and commitment and integrity, and all these things are in a big jumble. We talk about a lot of them, especially those of us that teach and instruct. We talk about a lot of them sometimes individually, and give examples and stories for each one. But actually, they're all overlapped. They're all overlapped with each other. Sometimes you work with a great officer that just does the right thing all the time, and you can actually pick each incident and say, well, look, he showed his integrity, he was committed to the group, and he was sacrificing himself too. He was doing all three in one incident. You know what I'm saying? So they're all so related to each other that it's actually it's like a ball of yarn. It's hard to separate them.
Well, and Scott, we always talk about passion, drive, success, and the love for the job. There's a lot of people we met that for one reason or the other, whether it's things at home or on the job, that have impacted and shoved that passion down a couple notches, their love for the job. How do you fight that off? How do you stay in love with this job so you can stay committed to the greater cause? I mean, it's easy when you hold a little baby, you get the grandma, where you see it, but until that call that impacts what you actually see, how do you stay dialed up and tuned up, stay committed with the passion so we can even talk about sacrifice?
Well, and this will rub some people wrong listening, but I've said it a bunch, and it's one of the hardest things that I had to learn when I became a fire chief is I couldn't understand why people didn't love the job as much as I did. When you just look at what a firefighter represents, right? And man, people love us, and you get to go in and share the brother and sisterhood, and you get to jump on a big red truck and go out the door. And so, I mean, if you look at it, it has so much to offer. And so, I couldn't understand why people didn't love this job. So we all have peaks and valleys, right? We've all been through periods where we've been 100% in and times when we probably checked out a little bit. What I always go back to, Rick, and this is what I tell Garrett and Braden when they get a little bummed out, man, is you got to look at the bigger picture. There's so many people that want to do this job that because of backgrounds or physical disabilities, they can't. We've been given this chance. We've been allowed to do this by choice. And man, why guys just don't want to give it their all? Still, you got to be able to shut it off when you go home. You can't let it consume you 24/7, 365. But if you just look what we get the opportunity to do every day, I just don't understand. So to answer your question, man, I just think about what this thing represents. And I just think, my God, one of the reasons I've told this story before that I'm doing 40 years is before I took the Plano test, I tested a bunch of places. This is when 2,000 or 3,000 people.
Was anybody paying you $15,000 to come on a job then?
Yeah, no, not right. And that was all the money in the world. And I sat in my car.
A sign-on bonus.
Before the Plano test.
11,000.
And I 19,000 is what I went to work for. And I prayed to my God and I said, just give me a fire job and I'll do 40 years. So that's why I'm doing it. I'm keeping my end of the deal. But yeah, I was so excited when I got that. If we could only maintain that mindset of when we were offered the job and made it through the academy and got our first assignment to our first firehouse and walked in there. I mean, there's very few things that are cooler. So I just try to remember what this whole thing is about and what we're given the chance to do every day, no matter what role we're in the department. Putting that mission first and contributing to humanity and making a difference in people's lives. I mean, that's got to be one of the purposes in life.
Well, and I you've heard me talk about my absolutely favorite company officer all the time, Lieutenant Bill Allen in Bedford Park. And Bill's the one that told me a long time ago, Scott and Kurt and John, he said, Rick, he goes like this. He goes, Rick, not everybody's going to love the job as much as you do. Don't expect that. Everybody has, and
right.
And, I used to talk about like Dick Fashada on the chief. He says, we talk about like Vince Lombardi, John, right? We talk about Lombardi, demand and passion. But, if you played ball for Lombardi football at the Packers, or if you worked for Jack McCaslin, all they wanted was you don't have to love the job like me. We want you to love even if you love the job just a little, that lieutenant or captain will get you the rest of the way. Someone will enter your life that's going to fire you up and get you to discover, like you said, this is the coolest thing in the world. Little boys and girls want to be you. Little boy, Toys R Us is back in business. I've said it 1,000 times. Go ahead.
And like a lot of guys say, you read it in books, you read it in ads, you hear it at seminars. Nobody gets in the fire service for money. Nobody joins the fire service for money, right? That's obvious. And I'm not saying that there's not some, the pay isn't pretty decent nowadays in 2025, and you can maybe get a nice pension and stuff like that out of it. But nobody joins the fire department like as an option when they're looking at 21 years old, figuring out what they're going to do. Let me see, I'm going to do some real estate, or I'm going to be a builder, or I'll be a fireman. Well, like fireman's always way down on the money list. But I can tell you, most of my career, I didn't know what I was making. If you asked me the day I made brand new lieutenant, if you would have said, so what are you making now? What's your annual salary now? I'd be like, I don't know. Most firemen, how much you making now? I don't know. Most guys don't even know what they're making. They might know the number that comes on their paycheck every other week, but they don't know what their annual salary is because nobody's driven by that. We're not there for the money. And I'm not saying money's not important, because like Jimmy Stewart said, and It's a Wonderful Life comes in pretty handy down here. But you know what? but it's not everything. It's certainly not at the top of the pile,
Yeah, for our young viewers, It's a Wonderful Life is a really old Christmas movie in black and white. And he's
go look it up and watch it. You'll love it.
He's talking to Clarence the Angel. Come pretty handy here, bub.
My first job
in Bedford Falls,
Florida, 77, $11,000 a year. That was my salary, $11,000 a year. That's how I started in the fire service. I don't even know how we were eating. I don't know how we were eating.
Well, and it's like I was talking about the $15,000 of Scott. That's the sign-on bonuses some people get just to come work for the fire department now. But Curtis, you and I got to work for and teach with some pretty incredible people in Illinois. Jack McCaslin, Eddie Enright, Tom Freeman, Ray Hoff, all these people that, again, I always say the circle of friends I hang with, you guys, my good friends, dear friends, and some of the people, the people I run with love this job so much you can't help but admire them. And when we talk, it's usually we'll talk about the bear John just chased off his porch up there and up on his mountaintop cabin, that stuff. We'll talk about that. But almost immediately it goes to, hey, did you see we got a new tiller? Hey, did you see that Halligan? Did you see what this guy did? And we talk the job all the time. And I'm not saying, folks, you have to do that to be great. It's because we all have families, but there's got to be some kind of commitment to get you to the point where you can even make those decisions, those hard decisions that, what, guys, we're here. And I'll say this, look, I will say this out loud. I am an EMS geek. I love being a paramedic. I still love running EMS calls, and I love lift assist. Are there abusers? Yes, there are. But I love helping little grandmas and grandpas off the floor like someone did for my dad, the gunnery sergeant from the Marines in Korea, that 5 times last month he was alive. They went and picked him up because he was stubborn. He fell, every time. And I ask people all the time, so, raise your hand if you're okay with some firefighter coming to your mom or grandma's or grandpa's house and treating them like shit. Tell me if you're okay with that right now. And nobody ever raised their hands. Now, look, it's not on my top 10 list to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go do a lift assist. But when you talk to greater cause, it's not all about structure fires. We all want to go those and pit-ins, but the majority of our impact in the fire service has nothing to do with red lights and sirens. John, we talked about the thousands of bicycle tires you guys have filled up and repaired in the Bronx. We've talked about, all the different people out there. And sometimes they call us for the most ridiculous things in the world because they trust us. Nobody else, there's not another profession that has the trust that the fire service gets from the public. Yeah. Go ahead.
In bad neighborhoods, urban cities, the firehouse is the oasis. Bicycle tires are just one example. I'd be walking to the apparatus floor to be one of the firemen in 58 truck, be putting the air in a kid's bike tire. And after the kid rode away, I said, how many did you do today? He said, 19 so far. 19 bicycle tires. I put air in the tire. Now some of them kids are coming in for air, and some of those kids are coming in for friendship. They're coming in to talk to the fireman. For a role model. And then because there's a bad guy walking down the block, and they're just hanging out there till they watch him pass by, and then they go back out and they ride the other way. So we're a lot of things to a lot of people. we know what we do for officially with our job, but there's a lot of other things we do too.
And Scott, hang on one second. There's a lot of people. I want to just before we move on, buddy. Sorry, but there's a yellow sign you see on a lot of public buildings at firehouses, and it's got a figure. It's like a street, a figure around a body, and that's Operation Project Safe Place. And I was on the advisory board for years for that, and that came about through a firehouse. A young child in a neighborhood, John, a distressed neighborhood, found safety, refuge, and found role models and protectors like Mr. Rogers. You say, find the helpers at the firehouse, and he ended up, when there was no one there, not at the firehouse, but he ended up in a position, he ended up getting killed by a bad guy. And that started the whole Project Safe Place program, where you hang that sign in your firehouse, you hang it on your city hall and the library, even some McDonald's, whatever. That means everybody there is trained on how to help the runaway, the person being chased, whatever. You can go there as a child. And John, you said that a firehouse has stood as a place, two things in your community represent what's safe, special, and for us. And those are churches and firehouses. Scott, go ahead, buddy.
Well, a couple things. I got to go back last weekend to Macapalooza. You mentioned some names, and I got to spend some one-on-one time with Chief Enright. And, man, just seeing him light up telling some of the stories. But I say that to say, our good buddy Mike Arrico, I was visiting with him, but talk to somebody who had to leave the job prematurely because of an injury, and they would give anything. They would make every one of those lift assist calls by themselves if they had the opportunity to jump back on the rig again. But you talk to somebody who wasn't ready to leave the job and was forced to leave, and our problems are minimal. They'll laugh at us, making $90,000, $100,000 a year and complaining about these things that we have to do now. And it really was a great weekend just to hear some of these guys talk about the old days and some of those things. But yeah, you complain about it till it's gone, and then you look back at what you had and now you no longer have it. That'll change your way of thinking a little bit.
That's an awesome point. Also, Curtis, what do you got, buddy?
I think one of the things that, we talk about all the people like Enright and the Hoffs and all them. I think one of the great things and why we always stuck together, and the people that all of our wins were big and all of our losses were little, and we acted that way. So we all had positive outlooks and we all did it, but all of our wins, we all celebrated. We made big deals out of it. And all of our losses, we'd complain and we'd talk to each other and we'd, tell everybody how awful it was, but they were little. They were always little and they were gone like that. So I think those people, when you're here and you're sacrificing for this job, you have to look and take those wins as being big, and the losses and the bad things that happen are just the way things are. I mean, you got to live with them. Yeah, get them out, get them off your chest, go talk to your friends about them, but celebrate the wins and the big ones, much bigger and much more. Put more effort into those than you do the losses. And we sometimes make the negative as the default. Negative can't be the default.
Yes, Curtis, all three of you, just what you said, all three of you today have said, the impact we have, the outcome, what we're trying, our outcomes, what we're trying to accomplish is greater than any personal
absolutely
feeling. There's a commitment to something that some people just can't do. I'm telling you, I'm not knocking them. They just can't do what it takes. And again, we're not rubbing them, look at us great firefighters, but let's be honest and stop being modest for a little bit and talk about what it takes, to really do what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And if you're not passionate, if you're not in love with this job, if you're not willing to take care of each other, there's so much more than just a costume you put on. It becomes a uniform. It becomes a symbol of what people see. That's why everybody, look, John, we say all the time, don't we, class, the Subway sandwich guy don't have a sticker in the back of his pickup truck that says Subway sandwiches, we do 12 inches. Or, the Home Depot guy's got the tattoo on his sleeve, 454. But firefighters, you go everywhere. Their T-shirts, their hats, their tattoos, they're just, now they give it away because they have gigantic mustaches. There's something that's so much bigger than any of us. And I think you want to be a great leader, you want to be into the job. That's what you got to realize is there's something much bigger than us as to why we're doing this. And, we're going to be there. John, closing thoughts?
It's a great topic. It sounds like when you start talking about sacrifice, and people always associate sacrifice with line of duty injury and death and stuff like that. And we know that is obviously a big part of sacrifice. But, you know, I think about all the guys. I think about it every day. Not all the guys that died on 9/11, but all the guys that have died since 9/11, you know, and the number's bigger now. More guys have died since 9/11 than on 9/11 from 9/11 related illnesses and things of that nature. And that's a sacrifice too. And nobody's even thinking about it. You know, they just put 340 something probies on, and every one of them raised their hand, and they're all cheering, and they're all on Facebook pictures with mom and dad, and then, you know, and they already made the sacrifice. They're already there, and they're just going to start whittling away at their health and their sanity and their, you know, everything else as time goes on. That's why when you do 40 years, sometimes you look a little broken down. Some guys look a little broken down after 40 years because besides the natural progression of humans getting older, it's a tough job. Just the daily grind is a tough job. I used to say more guys die from diesel fumes than from fires. You know, most of the places that fixed now, we all got the elephant trunks and stuff like that. But yeah, sacrifice is a real issue in the fire service.
Absolutely. Scott, closing thoughts?
Well, Rick and John, you had to deal with this, but as I consider retirement, I look back over 40 years and I thank God that I was given this. I've never had a day of regret. I never wish I was a financial planner or a real estate mogul. I've been happy doing this, but it scares me at this point to think, man, if I didn't give this job what I was able to give it, and I'm walking out the door, and if somebody asked me, what did I do over 40 years? And I had to tell a lie or say, oh, it was just a job, man, what an empty feeling that would be. And especially, you know, with kids on the job now, and to say, hey, you know, yeah, I think I contributed. I think I left it a little bit better than I found it. And at the end of the day, that's what they say, right, John, in New York, when you're old and you're feeble, and somebody said, what did you do when you were in your prime? I was a New York City fireman, and that was enough. Well, I think if you're a fireman anywhere, career volunteer, you're sacrificing, and that's more than a lot of people are willing to do. So I think at the end of the day, that is enough.
And nobody drives by. We say this all the time. Nobody drives by the warehouse in August. God bless those hardworking people, right? Mike Rowe talks about all the time. Somebody's got to do it. That great show. But they don't drive by the warehouse going, the manufacturers, God, the factory, God, I wish I could go work that press one more time in August. But they drive by the firehouse going, man, I would do anything to be sitting at that kitchen table having a cup of coffee, waiting for the bells to go off again.
Those were the good days. Those were the good days.
Those were Curtis, closing thoughts, buddy?
I think that, you know, we talk about sacrifice, we talk about that, but I think one of the things, especially as we've all done, we've all promoted up through it, is remember that every step you take, you have to sacrifice more, and it's your job to sacrifice more. This is the greatest job ever, and all of us have had great careers, and all of us are, you know, putting more into it, with half of us having kids on the job and stuff. And I'm like Scott, I hope that someday when I start to think about retiring, which isn't going to be anytime soon, I hope, but you never know. I think that we can all walk around knowing that we sacrificed enough to give more for our kids and for this business, and that we made it better.
Absolutely. You know, it comes down to what we've all said. It's about priorities. Family first, the first family first, then the second family. John, you talk about the mission, the men and me. It's an older book. The mission, the men and women, and then me. Remembering what the mission is. So, guys, this was another awesome topic. John, if they want to get a hold of you, what's the email?
ChiefJohnSalka@gmail.com.
And folks, if you're looking, I am right now posting probably 20 company officer academies that John and I are doing. They'll be on my website by the end of today. I'm almost done with them. So for those of you that have been hammering us when they're coming out for 2026, get ready. The information's on it to get a hold of Teresa at CSU. Curtis, if they want to get a hold of you.
Yeah, you can get a hold of us at Pearland Fire Department, or you can get me at cburt@me.com.
Perfect.
Scott at fireserviceleadership.com. And I got a quick question, Curtis. Is it chilly there? You got your job shirt on. Send some of that this way. It please.
Actually, I'm in South Carolina right now. So I'm sitting in the hotel room talking to you.
That's why he's been talking differently, because he doesn't he let his Houston accent go, which was a Chicago accent. But hey, I'm at chieflasky@gmail.com. Guys, we appreciate what you do. We love the fire service so much that we appreciate the honor of you even just checking this out. Spread the word. Keep loving the job. We end all of our shows with one very important phrase, and that's please keep the men and women armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember, never forgetting means never forgetting. Be safe. God bless you. Guys, love you. Thank you.